So this is the annual Investor Day. To what extent do we expect an update on profitability targets from the bank?
Yeah, I think usually every year, Scarlet, Marion Lake, who's the CFO of the bank, she comes on and really drills down in all of these different things. Analysts that we've talked to don't expect much of an update. They've got a 15% ROE target out there that they put out last year. There's also a $30 billion of net income goal that they have. So I don't think this is something that most analysts believe will change, but it will be an area to talk about, how are taxes going to change this? Will that actually make the bank more efficient? Is that something that we can see? And of course, as we're always talking about interest rates rising and how great that is for the bank, but I think it's something that you have to think about, okay, well, if this yield curve is really going to pop, how exactly are you going to do this, Jamie Dimon? How are you going to increase profitability? Is it going to be loans that are coming from consumers? Is it going to be really getting some of these companies to get comfortable with, say, the tax infrastructure and things like that, spending there, where they're actually going to come and make some of these deals, which feeds into JPMorgan really making money on those fees?
Okay, so they had earnings in January. They've got another one in April coming up in a couple months. What do they usually talk about here that is separate from what they might say on earnings when there's a bunch of people listening in?
Well, I think with earnings, it's just such an interest in what happened in the quarter, where's this charge coming from, how can we look at this and figure out our models and update it. That's really what the call is about for analysts.
So it's very granular.
It's very granular, and it's only analysts. It's not the buy-siders who, kind of have a voice as well. And this is kind of broader, a step back for goals. And the bank can also talk about initiatives too, like technology for JPMorgan is huge. And when they talk about their competitive edge, that's something that they actually have the ability to have each business head really focus on and explain to investors for the larger picture why you want to invest in my bank, not just why you should buy today or trade into it tomorrow.
Well, how are they going to do this before Trump speaks, right? I mean, banks have had a huge Trump bump. It feels like they've got to, maybe they should wait until 2:30 p.m. the next day after the address.
Well, they'll be speaking all day, and Jamie Dimon will probably be speaking to us at probably around 2:30, so maybe, he can address some of those things later in the day after a couple of tweets from Trump.
All right, well, give us a sense of how the day plays out, because it's an entire day. You mentioned Marion Lake, the CFO, will be speaking. Does Jamie Dimon speak for an extended period, and how long do investors have to ask their questions? What's the schedule like?
Right, so normally in the morning we hear from Jamie Dimon sort of quickly. He gives a bit of an opening remark and then quickly turns it over to Marion Lake, who usually speaks, I think it's usually about an hour and a half, just an overall presentation for the larger bank. And then we hear from different business heads. So that's going to be investment banking, asset management, and then the two lending arms, retail banking and commercial banking. So we get an update from each of them, and investors at each time can ask questions from each of those individuals. And then later on in the afternoon is when we get sort of the star-studded Jamie Dimon coming back on stage and sitting down, and that's really when a lot of Q&A happens, where he talks a lot about how the bank is really a lot better than other peers. That's one of his things that he does talk about. And he's a little bit unlike some of our other CEOs, really asking about how, answering, I should say, how the economy is going, what the consumer is thinking. And last year, too, I mean, he talked about already then the consumer really winning out, gas prices. That was something that was really big last year.
I'm guessing there'll be a couple of references to Fortress balance sheet.
Yeah, absolutely as well. I mean, I guess you have to hone down really what is going to make investors react, because they've been pretty sanguine about this stock. Just real quickly, what is going to be sort of the hottest topic that could potentially move this company from the investor standpoint?
I mean, certainly if they change guidance, I mean, that's a huge thing. But if there's some new initiative as well that they can talk about, there's been a lot of talk about in technology investment. Is there some plan that they've got going on that will really move the needle on consumer lending, for example, that will really get consumers to bank with JPMorgan rather than, say, the rival Bank of America?